Okay, it's good.
Hello and welcome to Apropos, a conversation between Clojure programmers that you can join in live on YouTube. We're going to discuss a few Clojure news items and share our opinions on them. Then we'll jump into a REPL and code some exercises or do some demos. If you're joining us live, feel free to comment in the chat and we'll try to address the questions. So today we have a full panel. We've got Ray.
Hey.
Mia.
Hi.
Mike.
Hola.
And I am Eric. Hello.
¿Cómo estás?
Okay. We're celebrating the victory of the Puerto Rican in New York this day.
Por supuesto.
Yep.
All right, so let's get started on our topics, huh? Looks like we got kind of a quick one, I think, but ClosureCon, the dates have been announced. So that's exciting.
And the location as well? Yep.
And the location, yes.
Yeah. In Durham, North Carolina, right?
Yes, the home of
where they all live.
That's where I went to high school. That's a nice town.
Really? That's where I went to college.
Oh, Duke? Or
wow.
What's there?
Yeah.
Awesome. I went to NCSSM.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister's friend just started there. That's awesome.
Yep. It's a nice little town in the middle of America. I guess it's not so small anymore because that whole area is big now. But
Yeah.
It's a good place for a conch. Yeah.
I was surprised when I found out that Cognitect was there, but it's such a nice place to be, and you've got everything you want except public transit, but they're working on that.
A lot of driving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we almost moved to that area. My wife was in medical school and she was going to match. And, you know, I was looking forward to it because it seems like a really cool place to be.
Research Triangle's near there too. Huh?
The Research Triangle, the different areas, the Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham.
So are you thinking of going?
I'm going to try to go if I can speak. I'm kind of not able to pay my way right now.
Yeah, I'm going to try and go as well for the first time because now I'm doing Clojure full time. So I figured it would be quite nice to go to the Mecca.
Yeah, and it's in
The center of it all. Yeah.
So they're probably going to be out in full force, right? That's what I imagine.
I would have thought so. Yeah.
The Cognitects. And
We're
this
going to
is
be allowed
supposed
in
to be...
there after last week.
So one thing that, like, you know, is kind of rumor and like putting stuff together, but when they didn't have Clojure West this year, they said that they were trying to focus on making ClosureCon bigger and better. So, you know, they haven't said that in this announcement that it's like bigger and better, but that's what they said when they didn't have a Clojure West.
How many people go to the conch then, Eric?
So they say that they have capacity for 500 people, but that they have never sold out. That is, you know, again, it's like putting together little pieces of information that they've announced. And when they announced the sponsorships, they said, get in front of over 450 programmers. So I'm sure that's what they're expecting, somewhere around 450.
Because Euroclojure is bigger than that.
Really? How big is Euroclojure?
Yeah, it's about 500 people. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wonder though, because they're saying they're not going to do Euroclojure too. So
yeah. But like I said before, there are quite a lot of Clojure conferences in Europe, and that you know, so it's a shame. I like Euroclojure because it's a big, nice conference, but there are plenty of conferences to go to and plenty of content.
So what would a bigger and better ClosureCon look like? Maybe more of a hallway track? Like, what do you mean by that?
I don't know. Like, I was I can only imagine, like, ClosureCon traditionally was a single track, and Clojure West was like the more eclectic multi-track one, like 2 tracks. And so you would get a wider variety of topics, but in the ClosureCons, they were kind of setting the tone for the rest of the year. And slowly the conch has grown to have either a second track or like half of a second track. So like half the time there are more talks. And so
they had 3 tracks last year, didn't they? Am I imagining that? I swear there were 3 different.
I think no, there weren't. And you know, several of the talks only had 1 track. So like those time slots only had 1 track, and then some of them they would break out into another room. But it was only 2 at most. But I'm assuming that means that they'll do 2 full tracks this time. Yeah.
Because last year was a lot of fun. There were so many fantastic talks.
Mm-hmm. And they always have great invited speakers too. People that really expand your idea of programming and what's possible. Last year they had Guy Steele, and I'm sure that they just say, speak about whatever you want. It doesn't have to be, you know, Lisp related or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he gave a really interesting talk. It wasn't like even Lisp related, really. It was about notation in computer science papers.
And how it evolved over time. Yeah.
How it's evolved over time, and like what hidden assumptions are there, and how interesting it is that even in like super statically typed papers, like about type systems, it is an unspecified language that they're using.
An informal,
informal, untyped language. So that's
completely not standardized. Yeah,
exactly. And he's big into standards and everything. You know, he wrote a lot of the interesting standards that we're familiar with. But then, of course, he's just there. I think that's the other cool part, is that you get to meet him and talk to him, maybe square dance with him.
Wait, there was square dancing and I missed it.
I didn't go to any square dancing, but he is a square dancer. So that was inside joke. So are y'all going? Are y'all planning on going?
It's within driving distance for me.
Yeah, I might be, so that way I can see my family as well. But I'm going to Strange Loop, and I think that's going to take my convention allowance from the company for this year. So.
Gotcha.
Well, it would be great if we could do an apropos from the conch. That would be nice.
Whoa, that would be.
Maybe we should do one anyway. And, you know, if one of us gets there, then it counts, you know.
You can all eat lunch with me.
Yeah.
That's true. We could all eat. Oh, my goodness. That would be perfect. We'll all be on the same time zone. We'll all bring our mics and we'll eat on mic.
Yeah.
I asked if you could hear me chew before we started, and you said no, so I'm going by it.
Well, it is video, so we know what's going on.
No, Durham's great. I'd love to go back.
Yeah. Oh, we got some comment on the YouTube there saying we should offer to do a live panel at the conch. That's a good idea, actually.
Oh,
if we all get there, you know, we should
so
have an apropos
chat
panel.
Room,
yeah,
everyone's actually there shouting out questions.
Yeah. But then everyone will know how short I am.
We can get you a stand, okay? Get you a step.
Haggis42 says that the conch is hands down the best conference he's ever attended. So that's pretty cool. That's cool. I definitely enjoy Clojure conferences. That's for sure. I really like the people. And it just attracts my kind of people.
I'm really excited to see whatever amazing thing Karen is doing with AI that she can show us, because whatever it is, it's going to be incredible. And there's got to be an update.
Clojure robots flying around or something. Yeah.
Dude, with open REPL ports, that would be awesome. All right. Well, let's move on to the next topic, which is
Sounds good.
Datomic ions. Dun, dun, dun. Big announcement. I don't even remember when the announcement happened, but we didn't talk about it on the last show.
No.
Are y'all excited about Datomic ions?
I don't understand them. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, can someone explain them to me, please? Like,
Yeah,
So
it's basically stored procedures in lambdas, basically, is the bottom line.
Well, they
Well,
run
actually,
in
that's
JVM.
that's kind of not true.
Mhm.
The idea is that the lambdas cause the invocation of the stored procedures. So your code, just like in Datomic, in the stored procedures, the functions in Datomic now, they go into the Datomic server. So that's what will happen with the ions as well. It will still run in the Datomic server on the cloud, but the lambdas will be the trigger for it. The interesting thing to me is that it means that you can trigger functions in your database from non-client facing things. So if something happens in the real world that triggers a lambda, like a notification on an SNS event or a S3 bucket or some custom event that you want to create, you can then trigger a function that operates some persistent thing in your database. So I think that's quite an interesting aspect.
that'd be great for monitoring ClosureScript applications, and in particular, if anyone's trying to do native stuff with ClosureScript.
Yeah, I wonder how much you could actually do. So the whole idea is you can run your application in the infrastructure that they've built in AWS for scaling your application, having an API gateway into your application. I'm sure you could even just serve up HTML right from inside your Datomic. But well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't use Datomic. I guess I feel like I wasn't ever going to use Datomic if I had to run it myself and pay for a hefty license fee. But the fact that it's billed monthly to me is a little bit more accessible and managed for me, meaning I don't have to do all the ops. That makes it more attractive, and I would certainly give it a try.
Orestes Marco says, I've understood ions as Heroku for Clojure running on AWS. That's really interesting. That
It's not though.
Yeah, what is that?
No, Heroku is a PaaS, platform as a service, so it's completely different. So I think the reason, what it is basically is what I said. It's the functions that you have now, but you can't do that. You can't run functions in Datomic, in a standard kind of way when it's on the cloud, because it's split across multiple servers and stuff like that. So they have to have a special mechanism for doing it, and that's what ions delivers. They deliver a model where you can actually ship your Clojure code into the Datomic, so you can operate your functions either via a query or via some other mechanism.
But it does have similar a similar sales message to Heroku, which is you don't have to manage your cloud, your servers. Just click some buttons in the AWS console and inject your Clojure code into Datomic, and you can have a web server, a web app up in the cloud. So I think that there's something to that idea that it is like Heroku for Clojure. It's a totally different model, but very similar, application for it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not. I don't think we're even splitting hairs to say that that's totally off. But okay, it's not.
Well, it's not
I know
splitting hairs if you
Heroku
say
very,
I'm
very
totally
well.
off. You're just disagreeing.
Yeah, I mean, I know Heroku really well, and it's really nothing like it. I mean, maybe from a marketing perspective, you could argue that.
Not from a marketing perspective, from a like use case perspective. If I'm a solo developer and I want to have a web app running and I don't want to spend a lot of time on ops, I could choose Heroku. And similarly, if I'm a solo developer and I don't want to spend a lot of time on ops, but I want to use the Clojure stack with Datomic, I could use Datomic Cloud with Ions.
But that's Datomic Cloud. That is not. I mean, the difference between Datomic Cloud and Datomic Cloud with Ions is this one thing, which is to do with shipping your code there.
Yeah, shipping your code, having your application run in the JVM of Datomic, and then connecting it, instead of with whatever Heroku uses to do load balancing and everything, you're using whatever AWS gives you.
Well, it's the Lambda.
So he's clarified here.
They don't have a router like Heroku do.
No, they're using AWS's router.
Well,
they're using AWS's API gateway.
No, only for triggering the lambdas, which then trigger the ions.
Right, but whatever mechanism happens, it's like I get to put my application in the cloud, have it auto scale, and not deal with those things, at least up front when your application is small and you're just trying to get off the ground.
Yeah,
So apparently Stu, so Orestes has clarified that Stu's talk, which I haven't watched yet, was he says am I cutting out?
Looks like it.
Just say it again.
Oops. Yeah. So I'm going to read Orestes' comment. He's clarifying. He says, Stu's talk was all about deploying your Clojure code in the same cluster as Datomic runs, essentially reintroducing the peer model back to Datomic Cloud, where the peer model means your Datomic data is in memory.
Yes.
Haggis42 sums it up as pushing code without a local build process such that it ends up poking out of a web endpoint.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
I like that way of putting it, whatever that means.
Yeah. I don't know if I get it, but I'm charmed by it.
It's bullshit.
So the way Rich Hickey explained it, I think it was Rich. I also watched Stu's talk, so I'm getting them confused probably. He was saying that they developed all this infrastructure and figured out what AWS services you would need to auto scale Datomic and have multiple clusters, one for development, one for production. And now they're giving that to you to run your code in the same JVM. And it just happens that now you can share memory space with the database, which means it'll be even faster.
Yeah, but it's not, you can't run a web app there. If
yes, you can. That's what they're claiming. Why can't you run a web app there? Because you use AWS's API.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong there. Okay,
and so then the API gateway connects to their Lambda, and then the Lambda connects to the Datomic.
Yeah, it seems like a weird concept of running a web server on a database, but okay, that's fine.
You know who used to do that is CouchDB. I don't know if they still do. Remember CouchDB?
Okay.
Well, we talk about.
My mind is blown then. Okay.
We talk about Clojure's killer app all the time, right? Everyone talks about Clojure's killer app, and I don't think that when we talk about it, we usually include Datomic. But if you could potentially. It sounds like you can run your own stuff out of a Datomic database. Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. I think that's new. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I want to give it a try. I'm not sure if it's a killer app. Like, I don't know if people really need the stuff Datomic is giving them, and if it's going to enable a new thing that would kill, that would be killer. That's my skepticism behind it.
Well, I like the fact that it's a functional database. I think that that alone is worth the is potentially the killer nature of the environment. Let's say the fact that your persistent data structures are actually durable now.
Yeah, Datomic by itself is. I think there's I don't know how many specific use cases there are for it, but it sounds like the ions could expand those or make it more appealing for use cases it wasn't necessarily before.
So you wouldn't have to run another REST endpoint or something like that. You could just chuck it all into that one thing. That'd be nice.
Haggis says, I get pushed a function and now it's behind a URL. Let's put JavaScript apps inside the database because reasons. It could be fun. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's only Java, I think. But the isn't putting JavaScript in the database? Isn't that Mongo? That's exactly what MongoDB do and CouchDB. These pipelines.
Well, MongoDB is notoriously difficult to use and scale, so.
As in, it drops data? Does it still do that? Or did they fix that?
I'm not
they run Mongo. They have their own cloud version of MongoDB as well now, so it's apparently very, very scalable. Web scale.
Web scale. As in, we dropped 30% of stuff on the floor, but
but
but we're still getting that other 70%, right?
I don't trust
the UDP version of databases. Yeah.
It's just called load shedding. Yeah.
No, your data is very safe with us because we'll probably lose it.
Yeah.
I can't be bothered to save that data.
But you won't even remember because it's so much data you can't even check. So why does it matter?
Privacy policies, MongoDB.
That's a GDPR solution right there. We don't need to forget it. Mongo will do it for us. Forgetting is a service.
All right, enough. The pounding on the people who aren't here and their product. All right, let's move on to deps.edn adoption.
I use it all the time now. I like it.
Do you?
I very much do. Yeah. I think it's simpler.
A quick poll to the audience: who's using it? If you're in the chat, let us know.
Chat, yeah.
I don't use it, but everything I use is right now. A lot of the programs I run and I write are in the same line repo that I created 3 years ago, and I just keep adding to it. So I have no reason to
make the jump.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll give you an example of the motivation. Yeah. Because I think it's totally rocking as well. Is that this whole SHA thing, this git SHA thing that you can do with deps.edn is a killer feature. It's a truly killer feature because, for instance, we have code in 5 different repositories. Looking at a CLI, a mobile app, and blockchain stuff. So, and it's all in ClosureScript, but actually there's a lot of common code. So ideally, what you or in the past, what you would do is you put it in Maven in a repo, then you would publish it to Clojure or Maven Central. There's a lot of overhead for that, to be honest. It's a pain in the neck, and especially when you just want like one small namespace or 20 functions or 30 functions. So you want to share it because there's a drift across those repos. Even with a small number of developers and a small number of repos, you get drift, you get functions changing. You want to, you refactor it in one repo, forget the other one. So it's very annoying to have to go through that whole like bundling process, put it out on the Clojure, then depend on it, and then have to version up everything. If you do it through these shards, holy shit, the workflow is so much nicer. I've got to tell you, it's an absolute killer.
Now, does it? So when you do that, that like throws up all sorts of red flags with me, where you have like these, like let's say 2 independent pieces of software that happen to have, for instance, a lot of the same logging code that's copy pasted between them.
That would be the idea. That would be the situation without a shared thing, yeah.
Right. So you don't have a shared thing, but they're independent. Like you could totally change the logging in one, and it wouldn't affect the other one at all.
That's true.
And so now what you're saying is centralize that, and now they're kind of locked together, and it's hard to. But I mean, in theory, if you have only one shared library, that is a source of.
Well, that's the point. Is you can have like 10 shared libraries.
Right.
They can be as small as you want.
What I'm saying is like deps.edn solves that, because now every branch, every commit is its own library.
Yes.
Could theoretically be, yeah.
Yeah.
One
So it's
related to do this whole release and.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone on the dependency side, everyone depending on that other thing, can just adopt it when they want, and it's super easy to change. No one has to publish it, and it's just superb.
A related use case is if you're using some library out there in a conventional mechanism, like from Maven, whatever, but you find a defect in that library, and the author or someone fixes it and commits that to GitHub. But you need that fix just because for development, you're not ready to release your stuff yet anyway, or whatever. Yeah. You can just point your stuff at that SHA and use that commit fix, right there. That's kind of enabling. You don't have to wait for an actual release. That happened to me recently with like line fig wheel. Bruce fixed something within a day. It was like fixed it, but he wasn't ready to make a release with that fix in it.
Right. And
I just quickly pointed at that SHA that had that fix, and voila, I'm up and running again.
That's really
nice.
And you can opt into doing that. You don't,
So is there
your line thing, Eric? The problem, the downside, I think, I thought, we did have this problem, was that some editors, and Cursive is the editor I use, but they don't understand deps.edn. So they understand line, but they don't understand deps.edn. So it turns out there was a plugin, a Lineagon plugin called Line Tools Deps or something, and that solves the problem, so that you can still have like a project CLJ. You can use line deps for your dependencies, but if you can still use Lineagon for building things, packaging things, for installing things. So it's just really nice bridge between the two worlds,
Then you can have your cake and eat it too. You can use line
and I was about to ask about that. Like, what are people using for all the other stuff that Lineagon does?
Yeah,
like, are you back to like make files? Because I really like.
Just keep it. It's fine. Just keep it. It's all good. Yeah. Don't need. I mean, I think that was a barrier to adoption, and this line deps.edn thing, or line tools deps, sorry. It's probably fair to say that it's fairly recently became usable. What would you say, Mike?
Yeah, within the past 2 months or so, it became usable.
Yeah.
Also, go ahead.
I was going to say, do either one of you have a blog post that you'd recommend, or have a blog post written up about this?
Nope.
Should do.
Watch the previous episode. So we talked about this.
Well, yeah, but a post. You gotta post.
No, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. We talked about how we don't blog enough. Then people in the Clojure community aren't loud enough.
I tell you, there is actually a good blog post about it, because leaving the kind of general snarking aside. I think there's a guy from what's he called, Tommy Reiko or something. He's from Matosin in Norway, or the Nordics anyway. Maybe it's Finland. But anyway, Matosin, they have a blog post, and it's all about like tools, deps, and stuff like this, and deps.edn, and how you make it work with Linigan. So I'll have a look, and maybe I'll put a link in the YouTube channel.
Another thing to go on Eric's comment, if you normally you'd use line, maybe if you're doing ClosureScript, you would use like CLJS build, right, to build your ClosureScript. And if you didn't have that, you would ask yourself, how do I build my ClosureScript project? And that itself has now become easier because you can just use CLJS main with a -c to compile something for you, you know. So they kind of have a synergy. They go together, you know. And it makes it so that you can actually get away with just using deps.edn with CLJS main for ClosureScript projects with a few aliases, you know, and you can get by. It's much simpler. So you start to ask yourself, what does line really do that you need it for? One thing would be if you're deploying a jar to Clojures, you know. But if you get out of that world, you don't need to do that anymore. You just use SHAs. Just take the leap and do it. I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
I never really got, well, I take that back. I had Linigan working, deploying to Clojures, and then it stopped working. I think when I moved to the Mac, and like it was just like GPG agent or something just was broken.
Ooh,
I just couldn't get it working anymore. I had to do it some other way.
That's one of those things that either works or it doesn't, right? And if it doesn't, then
exactly.
Man.
And, you know, you're on forums and stuff trying to figure out how it works, and then you realize I'm going to find another way. I'm just going to copy paste this code into my repo.
But that's the main thing I still use line for, is deploying. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we've been too long on this topic. Move on.
Yeah, let's.
I honestly, by the way, I just a small. I mean, you said too long on this topic, but we spent way too long on the conch. I mean, just before we go from this one, we talk about Clojure having like killer apps and stuff like this. This one is a killer app to me. I mean, you know,
what's it going to kill? What's it going to kill?
It's going to kill your need to do all this shit workflow to put these stupid libraries out there, and it's going to make your workflow much nicer because you can have. Dependencies which are much more fluid.
Like, is it going to kill Rake? Like, I don't understand.
I always thought of killer as being like, oh yeah, that's killer. Yeah, no, it's like it's killer.
It's really good, you know.
Yeah, it's like that's
really
wicked.
good. Okay, really good.
Yeah,
wicked, right?
It's a reason to come to Clojure because there's this kind of fluid environment.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to highlight, because it's something I only discovered last week, because we're still learning about what the implications of this stuff are, is that you can, on the command line, the CLI command line for Clojure, which again no one uses, but we'll get there. You know, you can express a dependency like in a deps.edn kind of like way, and then you can invoke something, directly on the same command line from the jar that you're invoking.
Oh wow! So
this is really amazing, you know. So the example I gave in the Trello thing was like this test runner. So you can depend on a test runner and run the tests in your project without changing your project or your deps.edn file.
Right.
So it's very much like this adlib thing that we talked about before, where you can add libraries to the REPL on the go. The CLI has the same facility where you can just add dependencies at the CLI. And this to me, this whole notion of being able to do these kind of things all on the fly, all fluid, is a really nice, and it's something which other tool chains, other languages, you know, don't have so nicely.
Well, and beefing up the CLI would help bring people in from other languages that have more of a CLI-based workflow than a REPL-based workflow.
Right.
Like, that's huge.
It's much faster to start than lining in.
That's nice.
That's a win, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't very quick to start, then maybe you'd be put off with it and stuff like that, you know. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to get a bit excited about this stuff because I think it's really going to help us. I think it's going to change the workflow. You know, in a year or two's time, when we look back at what this change in the technology infrastructure has brought us, our workflow will be completely different. You know.
Yeah.
And we'll be using Graal at the time too. So.
Okay, that's a conversation killer. That's a killer for conversation.
Well, I'm gonna have to check it out now. The CLJ. I have it on my machine, but I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, we've been talking about migrating to it, and we just don't. It's hard to really figure out where to get started when you're doing a bunch of other things.
Yeah. And honestly, it hasn't been easy. I mean, we've been looking at it for a few months, and it hasn't been an easy couple of months, to be totally honest. I think it's getting there now, though. I think from now on, with the line tools, deps things, and these nice things in the CLI that I'm talking about, I think there are some real advantages to going that way, especially in your case, Mia, where you have, where you have a lot of people working potentially across a lot of different, like the mono repo. Maybe it's a mono repo killer. Maybe we can kill
that's been our big, that's our big thing right now, because we're using line modules and it doesn't quite do what we want it to do. So we really want to be using deps.edn to do this, and it's the getting started literature isn't really there, and because we're on this strict timeline, we don't have a lot of time to iterate right now.
Yeah.
So is it possible that people are going to be like deploying apps like totally out of like 25 different GitHub repos? Like, wouldn't that be interesting? Like, we don't even make a jar. We just like depend on each other's SHAs, and like one of them's the main app.
That's exactly what will happen. Yeah.
400 Git repos. That's like the future.
Yeah, that looks. Oh, jeez.
If you look at the Maven like downloading shit, I mean, it's going to be like that, but for Git, it's just going to be like 1,000 Git repos that your stuff comes from.
Wow.
And you can do that in Clojure, right? Because you don't have to precompile. You can depend on the source directly.
Right, and those libraries you're depending on are depending on other SHAs.
By the way, that's the other thing. NPM deps as well now. They're also transitive.
Okay.
So you have a little bit of code in your your little bit of code that depends on some NPM thing, left pad or whatever. Yeah, let's hope not. But left pad, But I depend on your code, and then your code will bring in that NPM dependency. That was a recent fix, wasn't it, Mike? I saw you talking about that on the ClosureScript compiler.
Yeah, I think that's basically so ClosureScript has always had this, deps.cljs, I think. If you put that in your library, I think it's always been able to express foreign libs in there, like as upstream libs that thing depends on. But I think a recent thing is the ability to also specify npm deps in that same file. So that effectively lets you do what Ray said. You could depend on a library that itself depends on some npm deps. And it's kind of
okay. Talking points over. Now you can carry on.
Yeah. Killer. I think that's got to be like our catchphrase. Like,
killer?
It's killer. We got another killer topic. Shall we skip this topic and go straight to the REPL? Because
we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're over.
I agree. Yes.
Okay, let's do it. So are we still doing the podcast? I'm confused. Should I read the thing?
We're gonna
have a poll, right? We're gonna have a poll.
Okay.
So
it's not over yet.
Yes, we're gonna do it for this one, and then we're trying to decide. Hello, listeners. We're trying to decide if we should keep it going with the podcast, like keep publishing the podcast separately, or just have the videos from now on.
Right, because the podcast is work to edit and host and publish and everything, and we have so many followers on YouTube. We're just wondering, and so few downloads on the podcast. We're wondering if it's even worth it. So we'll have a poll, Twitter poll, democracy at work. Okay, so I'm going to read the thing.
Yeah,
democracy killer.
Twitter polls are how you slot everything.
Podcast killer. Yeah.
killer poll. Twitter's killer feature.
I'm so glad you learned a new word.
You got to use it like 100 times, and then it becomes a habit. All right. So we're about to switch over to the REPL. If you're listening on the audio version, you can watch the REPL coding on YouTube, and we'll end the audio version here.
REPL.
REPL. Everybody bring up your REPL.
Yes, the REPL.
Repular action. Reptastic. Okay. And who's got control of the video thing?
Oh, yeah. Someone needs to
Would
tap.
that be Ray?
I think I've done it.
Okay.
And I'm going to be leaving in 10 minutes because I have a meeting. So.
Okay.
And I'm gonna
Feel free to just hop out at that time then.
Yeah. I'm just going to pop to the place where this REPL is running, actually.
It's actually on the screen now. I can see it on the
It's got
video.
some weird lines on it, though.
Oh, I resized my screen. Did it do that to it?
Give it a try. Change it.
That's interesting that my terminal did that to your terminal.
Yeah, while you're doing it, leave it alone.
Yeah, I won't mess with it.
Yeah. I'll
So
go and have
today-
a fix of it. So,
Okay, so-
you can carry on talking. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Today we wanted to just talk about the differences between loop recur and reduce, and when we like to use one versus the other. And so I don't know. This one might be a lot of talking and while we code. Seems like there's no particular exercise we're trying to solve. We're just, I guess it's going to be like a stylistic, aesthetic discussion.
One point is that loop recur is functional, right? And if you say why is it functional, what makes it functional? I think part of it must be the fact that the recur has to be in tail position, and it's basically something that it's not an imperative loop, right? That's what I want to say. You can't just kind of recur from anywhere. So if you take like some existing for loop from some imperative language, sometimes you can't easily convert that to a loop recur, right?
Is that
would be an interesting blog post in itself, is like under what conditions can you convert an imperative loop into a loop recur, and what will prevent you from doing that? I remember struggling with that initially when I was switching to this way of programming.
right? So, I mean, maybe we should start with some like a refresher about what loop recur is.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. So, loop is going to start like that, and then in this args you can put in a binding. So that's like the initialization. And let's do something more interesting.
Okay.
And you can do something like when it's positive, you're going to print it and then recur, but you're going to decrement it. So eventually it should get to 0 and then die, right?
Yeah, put an A after your deck.
Oh, deck A, thank you.
Yeah.
So what's happening is we're calling recur with the arguments to loop, and so it's going to
that
print
REPL
out
is
all
not
the
showing
numbers.
up.
It's not showing up. I typed the whole thing. All right.
Oh, yeah, it did disappear from the screen over there.
Am I in the wrong thing?
No, it's just something on Ray's end. Like I can see what you're typing, so everything's fine. Oh, you exited the.
Sorry.
That's interesting. So yeah, just type CLJ and you'll be back in a REPL. Okay, now we're back in a REPL. Yeah.
And right, so that's what I did last. So you see that prints all the numbers, but it's actually doing a loop. Like it's actually, in the bytecode, when the compiler marks the beginning of the loop, like where you enter with the loop keyword, and then it keeps track of the last one in scope, and then that recur just like does a go to and jumps right back there. So it is a loop. It's a very tight loop in the bytecode. It doesn't use any stack or anything, but it has to be in tail position. So like one thing that I think Mike was trying to explain was that you can't do like, you can't let's see, something like this. You can't do like +1, +2 of recur A, right? Like,
Okay.
I don't know what that would even mean, but like it's not even going to work. It's not going to compile, because what you're doing is you're saying, well, I'm going to return from this recur and then add 2 to it. But that means it's not tail position. If you have to remember where you were and that you're going to return there, you have to use a stack to do that. And so then that's not tail position. So tail position is anytime you are doing this as the last thing. So you can be inside of a conditional, but it has to be the last thing you do, because you're never coming back.
And I'd like to
go ahead.
I'd like to make a point. So I guess the bigger picture here is talking about how this thing is actually a functional construct. And one thing you can do is you can take this code and you can change the loop to a function, right? And get rid of the initial assignment to A, right? And then that will produce a function. Then you could call it.
Yeah, okay.
And it's kind of a weird way to do it. But what I'm trying to convey there is you can take a loop recur, and really recur is kind of more natural if you start off thinking about just recurring to the function that you're in. So if you gave it a name, let's go, I guess, do it normally, right? Do a defen, defen foo. And then instead of recur, decay, we'll just name this foo, right?
Right, totally fine, yep.
That's kind of like where you would start off. Let's do like a smaller number, foo8. But to me, it's an imprecise argument, but it kind of goes with the idea that loop recur is functional. You can convert it to that, maybe. I don't know if that's a satisfying argument.
So I like to look at loop recur like a for loop. So if you imagine a for loop in JavaScript or whatever, as I equals 0, I is less than 100, I plus plus. Let's not do 100, but it's not going to run. But you know, then you do print I, whatever. So what you have in the for loop is an initialization, right? You have an advancement, so you're advancing through the loop, and you have an end condition. Then you have the body, and it's very much the same as your loop. I'm gonna hit enter. There we go. Uh-oh, like that. Where's my? Uh-oh. Erase it like it never happened.
That is weird.
All right, let's try that again. Okay. So if you have your loop code here, you have they're all in different places, right? You have your initialization, you have your advancement, which is the deck in this case, and then you have your end condition, which is the pos A, and then you have, this isn't the one that works. You have your body in there, whatever you do in there. So like, I think of them very much like convertible. The issue is, like in a for loop, you often like initialize stuff at the top. Like you say, oh, here's a new array. And then you do a for loop that modifies that array. And then you return the array at the end of your function. Well, in here, you would put the array right in there. So you do like, well, it's going to be a vector. You put it in there because it's mutable. It's in JavaScript. And you can't mutate it in Clojure, but you can pass it along to the next iteration. And so you can do something like, I got to get rid of that print line. You can do something like conj v a, and of course we need to return this thing. So we're going to do, if it's positive, it's not using the, what's it called anymore?
Oh, the Repo reline.
Yeah, because I was trying to put a new line in there.
Yeah, we could probably figure that out again. I forget how we started that before.
Yeah, so we're doing, so if in the case where it's positive, we're going to recur. That balance, and then otherwise we're going to return v, right? So now you see I was able to build up a value over the iterations because I'm passing in the next version to the next iteration of the loop. Mm-hmm. So like to me, it's very, very translatable, a for loop to a regular loop. It's just, you have to think of anything mutable has to be in that like
and the
bindings list. Yeah, in here. And then also like, you know, this standard like explanation, the standard example is you're doing Fibonacci number, and so that's plus fib of n minus 1, oops, and fib of n minus 2, right? And so if you do this for 6, it'll probably work just fine. No, Stack Overflow, too big. Go for 3. Oh, even that gives you a Stack Overflow. Did I do something wrong? Yes, I did.
No
I
base
didn't
case,
do
maybe.
the base case. Yeah, thank you. If for 0 and or equals 1, now let's try it. Fib 6, it works. But then you do fib 10 and it's like, no, that worked. Fib 20. Wow, that's so fast. How is that possible? Kill it. There we go. There. Okay. Well, that's gonna take too long. It is possible to kill it, but you can convert that into like a form where you are calculating it forward instead of backwards. Like you're not doing the n minus 1. You're starting at the 2 1s and you're adding. And instead of, so that means you need another argument. So traditionally you would have like a fib star that would have that accumulator there, and it would start at 0 and like it would keep going. And you could then do a tail call, right? But what Clojure lets you do is just build that right in with a loop, right? So you can just have that accumulator be here. Now I'm going to do it like this. So I'm going to say if it's 0 or 1, we're just going to return 1. We're done. Otherwise, we're going to loop, and our accumulator is going to start at 2 because it's going to have the 1 and the 1. And it's going to, and then we need like the current number we're on. So we're going to call that C. That's going to be, it's going to start at 2. Is that right? Because we started with
0 1, yeah.
Right, we already did the 0 and 1 case. So yeah, so we'll see. And so now what we're going to do is, oh wait, I remember. So you actually do it with an A and a B. That's easier.
Okay.
And so these are the last 2 numbers you've seen. And so to get the next number, you add the last 2, and then to get the second to last number, you just move the other one over. So these should be 1 and 1. Yeah, I'm getting confused now. But there's a way to do it where you're moving forward and adding and progressing, but it can all be done because you've got like everything you need with you. It's like, you know, you pack your suitcase and you get to move along the iterations one at a time instead of using the stack to get all the answers like that. Sorry, I couldn't solve it. It would take too long and not interesting. Yep.
But yeah, so like if you have a for loop in some imperative language, you can pretty much take the mutable variables and hoist them into those bindings there, and you're good to go.
Right. That's
I think there might I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head, but there might be other things that that might be challenging to put into a loop recur, where loop recur is nice and constrained. It makes it so that you can easily refactor it when you're in some functional code.
Right. Well, it's not as good with recursive data structures. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're doing a reduce, it really is pretty good. But if you're doing something like a filter, like the way to write a filter with a loop recur is you have your current list.
Okay.
Let's say it's 1, 2, 3, and you want to filter out the even. So you have your accumulator, and you're starting
with an empty list.
Nothing.
Okay.
Yes. And so this is how you do it with a for loop, right? You would make an empty list and you start adding stuff to it. So you would say, if we got an empty list, well, just return the accumulator. Otherwise, you call your function. So if it's, what did we say?
Even.
Keep the odds.
Okay.
Keep the odds. So if it's odd, first ls, then we're going to recur with rest ls and conj the accumulator first ls. Otherwise, if it's not odd, we're just going to skip it. So we're going to do, rest ls and then pass the accumulator unchanged, right?
Yeah.
And so that should give us 1 and 3. But notice, like you did it like you would do a for loop, whereas if you did reduce,
don't you think that the semantics of this are a bit nicer though, in the sense that you can have this recursion. The recursion's a bit like the filtering. You can have this if else kind of recursion, whereas doing that in a for loop isn't so obvious, I think.
Well, a for loop would look like, var. I'm not going to evaluate it, so don't worry. Var like accumulator equals that, and then for I equals 0, I is less than ls.length, I plus plus, and then you get your thing in here. So you say if if lsi is even, %2 equals 1, then you do act.push lsi, else nothing. You don't
Nothing.
And so yeah, that's it. I mean, it's not like, this even looks simpler to me, right? And you got this, the thing about the for loop is you got this nice pattern that's like very universal of how to iterate through a list. So your termination condition is kind of like given to you. It's not put in the body. Like this one is like, it's all confused in there. Like, well, this is actually the termination condition, but these are recursion conditions. I can see why this one is not as done in other languages, right?
What I want to say is I think the loop recur, with the constraints that it makes you abide, it makes it easier to refactor. Even though it looks more verbose, it's more functional. It's just more because you can't just mutate crap in an imperative way.
Yeah.
Like you can't have a when something is true and then mutate something.
Right. It's true.
It forces you to kind of be clean and put your bindings at the top of the loop. And
right.
I guess like if you wanted to, if some of that stuff got complicated, you could factor out some of that stuff in the middle into a pure function off on the side. And, that kind of refactoring is a little bit easier or a little more mechanical to me, without having to even think about it so much.
For sure. Yeah. And like, I destructured this with first and rest, and I had to use first twice and rest twice. But if you destructured it in a let, like it would be really fast. I mean, fast, easy to write, much clearer. Now the other thing is that's how reduce is written, is like this, right? So this easily translates into a reduce. So like if you do defin reduce, so it takes, what does it take? A function and then the initial value and then a list. It's the same thing. If you have an empty list, then you just return your initial value. It's also the accumulator. Then otherwise you're going to recur, same f, never changes, with f of I and the first L. And then the L is just rest of L. That's it. That's reduce. And you can, if you go through, it's gone now. You can't see it on the screen. But if you go through and look at the filter, it's like every little part corresponds. And so that's why you can write filter as a reduce. The filter takes a function and a list, and it's reduce. Gonna have that same condition. Wait. The accumulator and the value. If f, which is really a predicate on the value, then into conj ac v. Otherwise, we skip it, and then we start with empty, and we have our L. Did I miss a paren or something?
It seems like it might be. Maybe one more paren somewhere.
One more. There we go.
Yeah.
So that reminds me, there's that paper, right? That basically is like the universality of, what is it? Fold right.
Yeah.
Yeah, reduce in our language. Like you can write map and any of these things in terms of reduce. Reduce is the general thing. But that makes you wonder, like, is loop recur even more general than reduce? Is it even more lower on the stack, I guess, of abstractions?
So what you would have to do for loop recur to be, for reduce to be more general, is you start adding in like a bunch of stuff into your initial value. So your reduce whatever function is going to be really complicated, but then you'll have like, well, actually I need a number and an accumulator thing. Oops, sorry. An accumulator thing and another number.
So you could argue that you can almost write everything with reduce, but after a while it gets to be like kind of harsh looking, and it's better just to switch to a loop recur.
Reduce has to work on a list. So whatever goes here has to be a list. Whereas loop recur, you could be counting to a number. Like I started at the beginning, like I'm counting down to 0 or counting up to a number. So then you don't have to do like a range and waste memory doing that.
That's a good point. Yeah. So loop recur is the most general thing.
Yeah.
It's like the bottom of the stack of tools that you can use. It's the most vulgar of the things, and less vulgar as you get higher up to your nice map abstraction. Yeah.
And I think often what a lot of these features, like we've done in previous things like shuffle and stuff like that, or various other kind of higher level, even of just filter and reduce, they're kind of more semantically, maybe reduce isn't so semantic, but filter certainly is. It's semantically more obvious what's going on. Whereas loop recur is just, it's just a collection of it's just a technique, isn't it? Whereas filter has a semantic meaning, and that's where it's nice, isn't it? And as you add, you look at all the operations on collections, and they're essentially semantics on those collections rather than just operations on the collections.
Right.
Yeah. Filter has meaning to me. Yeah.
Filter has meaning. Like I use loop recur a lot in Go processes because
like Go loops,
it's a loop. Like I need to check this value coming from this channel and then wait on this value and then I'll start again and So you couldn't do that with a reduce because you need a list and reduce. Like an infinite loop. you might need one, and that's what loop is good for that.
Yeah. Cool.
But I agree.
Well, I've got to go now anyway myself. So.
Yeah, I think this probably covers that topic pretty well.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So
thanks a lot, guys.
All right. See you later, everybody. Should I read my thing? Let me read it.
Okay, read your thing.
So if you like the show, please subscribe, and you'll be notified when new live hangouts are going to happen. You can also find us on Twitter at apropos_cast, because you know how we like our underscores in our lispy languages. All right.
Can I just say quickly, by the way, it's been a really good interactive chat session with the people online today. And just a shout out to thank them for that, because I think it's really been good. There's a lot of input, and I think we've tried to call out a few of the sort of like the contributions that we caught. So thanks.
And
for
we missed a
everyone
lot
that
of
watched.
good ones too, I'm sure.
And we can definitely review it afterwards. But it's been really, really excellent to have that level of involvement. So thanks to everyone who's participated there.
Yes, we love you. Thank you. Subscribe. All right. See you later, everybody.
Later.